How y'all be, man? Hairless makes it a blue sea. It's me. Back, man. It's showtime, y'all. I wanted to holler at y'all early this morning, but I had to do some running around. But better late than never, right? We back at it again on that good chapter 1000 of Michael Jordan, that 1023. You know what time it is. Let's just get into it because it's just too crazy. It's just a bunch of crazy stuff. I'm letting y'all know now. I know I say this sometimes and it don't happen. But I'm serious. I'm gonna have to do 4 or 5 videos within the next week because this chapter just unlocked way too much stuff for me. As hyped it is for me to see my boy hailing in from the south side, Shimosuke Village, man, the Senpai of the Santo Ryu. King made this chapter for me personally because this chapter basically was about him and what it does to the story. And I'm going to explain when we get into it right now. I did like the cover. You had the Shichibu guy on one side. Ooh, no. And Big Mama on the other side. My boy, what I used to call him back when I was editing and first started doing videos. My boy, Charlotte. The D is for donut. Katakuri, man. You know, the Warlords, they were dope, man. Like, Jinbei's not in this picture for obvious reasons, but this whole time skip theme of the villains and the interactions of some of them, right? And allies like Yamato and Law, it's dope, man. But let's get into Zoro, Sanji, and King, man. We open up, we see Zoro and Sanji chilling after how they ended last chapter, right? They ready to throw some hands, well, feet in Sanji's case and anything else for Zoro, right? And we have a random scrub try to shoot Zoro, which, see, they're still focused on Zoro. I think they got spoiled on Roof Piece because they real shook at Zoro right now. Like, even King and Queen was like, yo, we got to get Zoro up out of here, dog. So what ends up happening is he gets interrupted by my boy, what I call him, Kapamatsu, showing up out of nowhere, which, thinking about it now, like, he's really only in this chapter with Hiragoro to give exposition about Zoro, but we'll take it. It is what it is, right? He stops the bum from shooting at Zoro. Then we go from that to directly to a flashback of good and Marco. What? Where did that come from? Like, I know where it came from because, Marco was giving us exposition about King last chapter, but I didn't expect this. I didn't expect his race to be this important. Like, the last chapter made it crazy, but this makes it even, it brings up a lot of theories about the world government in particular, and when they choose their locations and stuff, geographically speaking, right? Because of the red line and the grand line. For all intents and purposes, I don't care how they're translated. If they live atop of the red line last chapter, right? And then we see in this chapter, Marco's basically referencing the Grand Line, right, with Mary Joie. Like, I don't care because they serve the same purpose. It may be important later, but right now it's all the same to me, right? You know what they're talking about. You know what they mean. So I'm not even going to get into that debate because I already know the community. That's going to be debated. Well, the Viz comes out, like, it kind of doesn't really matter because these two things have not served a purpose in the entire story yet. So it is what it is, right? All you need to know is that's where King's race live. There used to be a whole race of King. Now supposedly he the last one. We know that never happens from anything positive. And it was probably subjugation due to the celestial dragons, which you could assume that because they've tried to subjugate every species on the entire planet. Humans, fishmen, mink have all faced something to do with the hands of the world government, right? It's just what it is in the series. We got to get these guys out of here, right? But I'm interested in not just what's said, right? Because Marco says, like, oh, I thought Mary Joie was the only thing above the Grand Line or something to that, basically referencing the King's race, right? Whitebeard says in the distant past, when we hear distant past in this series, you know what we thinking. We thinking for a century. How old is King? How long does his race last? Because for him to exist, he had to have parents, right? When was his race subjugated. Was this, you get where I'm going with this? This has a huge impact on the series because it would explain why that location was picked. It's not just symbolism and the people of Mary Joelle, aka the celestial space helmets, just want to physically be above everybody. There has to be more to it because we know that the choice for Mary Joelle, its location is the centermost point in the One Piece world. We've talked about this a lot within the past month or so because this stuff kind of seems like it's coming in play, including how the empty throne is positioned and what it looks like and what's on it. For them to get rid of King's Race, it just means like they wanted that land, that resource for something, right? And either you can control something or you can get to something. This might be ancient weapons related, where each portion of creature is given dominion over one of the ancient weapons and to make sure they stay apart depending on what happened in the wars of the old days, right? Because King looks like a derivative of someone from Skypiea. He's pretty much the exact opposite design as far as his coloring is concerned. And even in this chapter now, it's implied that he's a Lunarian, which would mean the moon, of the moon. You know, the moon people. And we know the hieroglyphs on the moon in the series involve what? The people of Skypiea. And, you know, Getaka Tencho. No, I'm joking with that part. But even, you know, the moon is referenced a lot within the series, like even with the mink in Sulong form, right? That happens because of moonlight. So I know it was going somewhere with this nighttime thing, right? It's not just the dawn thing, the symbolism of the dawn and whatever the D clan is. It has something to do with actual geographical and natural functions in the series to do things, right? Because without moonlight, the mink can't do certain stuff, right? Without sunlight, you probably can't navigate to certain islands, like because of the way log poses work. Like this is reason for all of this. I just want to know why Whitebeard and Marco were having the discussion in the first place about King's Race and its location. Were they traveling somewhere? Like, they couldn't have been interacting with Kaido, because I just think, by the way, I don't think any of the rocks, like maybe Kaido and Big Mom would interact from time to time because we see they got each other on speed dial. I don't know if it's the same, right? If it would be the same for someone like Whitebeard, right? Because his views his goals weren't the same as what Big Mom's and what Kaido's is and whatever Rock's Deeds of X was, right? And some of that might be based on subjugation. And even if you look at King, right? I know I'm jumping all over the place, but y'all know how I get, because we're talking about King now and Whitebeard and Marco and how those relate. Like, did he see an article in the newspaper about Kaido? And even like what he says, right? Marco asks Izo, do you believe in God? We've never heard that question in the series before. We've seen deities brought up. We've seen the mythology. We see different religions brought up throughout the series, like, you know, Buddhism, Hinduism, which they're, you know, and we have Christianity, representations all over the series, whether it be a character's design, their name, or like kind of like Mihawk, right? His design, and, you know, the fact that he carries a sword with a cross on it. Like, there's a bunch of stuff in the series about different cultures and religions. But I don't think actual God is ever referenced in the series. Like, we always hear God of something, like Ryuma's God of the Sword, right? We have God's Valley, and now we have God's Land, apparently, which could have been the top of the Red Line and or Grand Line, right? Where these creatures, the Lunarians, lived, right? Maybe they have a gargoyle theme, right? Where during the day they can't do much, but at night maybe that's what they're, you know, like those type of mythologies have existed before. So I'm very interested on why Whitebeard was having this conversation, and was he used to ask the other commanders or just people in his crew if they believed in God. Because the way he has Izo, obviously we always wait for the viz, but you know, I like to talk, so we talk about this stuff now. But for Izo to respond like, "Oh, you asking me about do I believe in God," is the same drunk talk that Whitebeard used to do. So it's like, if a location they didn't come across, And they didn't come across Kaido or King or anybody else for them to be having this conversation. Was Whitebeard drunk one day and just seen Marco in Phoenix form or something and said something crazy that the rest of the crew laughed about. But then it led to an actual conversation about information from the past that people don't know about. Even to this day, people don't know about King. That he's of an extinct race. Like King is King's gonna be way more important than what I thought. I only looked at him from a power scaling standpoint and a structure of crew, and him being his own character. I honestly didn't think his character was gonna play that important role as far as information is concerned until last week what Marco said. And it is just like, because it implies world government interference. That just screams world government interference. And it would explain, too, why he would want to help Kaido. Because his whole entire race were probably subjugated by just human beings, right? The celestial space helmets and whatever they did, And then even implying, like, his people were probably experimented on. This is just me speculating, right? Just based on the chapter. What Queen said about Sanji's flame as being an augmentation. He says, you're not a Lunarian. And then they pan over to King with the little ... implying that King is a Lunarian. So it's like, did Mads have access to different beings? Because they were trying to crack the genetic code, like with Judge, in his augmentation of the Germa kids, and whatever's going on with Sanji, because clearly using the raid suit, it just has done something to him. And a long time ago when I first started doing videos, this was something that we talked about. For those of y'all that knew my old channel and my old name, this was a thing. It wasn't like a daily thing, but it was definitely one of my popular discussions. Had to do with not trusting Germa. Right? Because their situation is always iffy, and then the way they treated Sanji their whole life, for him to still have a raid suit, it functioned properly, and then him bringing up Sanji and Usopp and Frankie wanting to mess with it, one of my theories was like, oh, they're gonna find something with the raid suit that would do, to be a problem. But Oda made me forget about that, because once he used the raid suit, he didn't even care that he used it. He was just like, oh yeah, and I can go invisible. So I just kind of forgot about those whole discussions. Sanji reminded me real quick today, talking about feeling off about using the raid suit, which makes me think he may start questioning using it now. Like, what did Judge do? Because earlier, was it last chapter or 2 chapters ago, Sanji brought up being interested in Queen's tech. And then we see in this chapter, Queen talking about his tech being more advanced than Vegapunk, which I think is cap. Now, if you think about what Matt's focus was, Vegapunk might be the overall genius, but his focus might have been technology, right? Because we got the Pacifista early in the series, and what they could do is still leagues ahead of what technology. And these guys barely just got, they even have cell phones yet and internet. So his technology being that far advanced creates a problem, right? It creates a problem in a sense where you don't know how much he's holding back, So when you think about the genetic code and stuff like that, were they all working on different projects where Caesar and Judge seemed like this would be more their lane? And since we don't know Vegapunk yet, like I said, Vegapunk was probably working on engineering and robots and ancient weapon type stuff. And these guys were trying to crack the genetic code. Well, during that time, if they had access to a Lunarian, it's possible that this is where Sanji's fire attribute would have come from. I personally think that's not the case. I think this is just here to lead us to a conversation about it. But I think Sanji's ability is strictly on his own. Because I'm aware that he's a failure, and technically he's still been genetically modified, probably in some way. It's just a matter of he was able to do what the other children couldn't, maybe. I'm not really sure how that's going to play out. I just thought that we were done with that whole thing with Sanji, but clearly we're not. I like it, because now we're going back to Sanji questioning using the suit, hopefully. And him not being so carefree about it, and maybe being a little bit more suspicious on what Judge is doing. Like, why was this given to me? And the way it was done, it was just slipped to him, right? And now he just starting to wear it. Maybe they knew he was going to wear it one day. I'm not sure. And like I bring up with Big Mom, did she ever acquire German's tech? Because they just left Whole Cake Island. I just don't think they packed everything up. But the interesting what led us to the conversation being basically we went from Whitebeard and Marco, right? Basically talking about King to Sanji and Queen, basically talking also about King, while Zoro's just fighting King. So it's like, to me, this chapter was more about King than everybody else because of what it unlocks. And him wanting to help Kaido, like I said, it might be because of how his people were treated. Depending on how old he is and where did he come from and who kept him alive up until he was strong enough to protect himself. Was he always with Kaido? Did Kaido seek King because he knew King existed, or did King seek Kaido? You know what I mean? Like, we might not even get all of that, but that's just where my mind went, because, like I said, they were talking about God's Valley without talking about it. If their land used to be considered God's land and God's Valley, like, if maybe God's Valley is also a part of God's land, right? Which would include God's sea, right? And God's air, Skypiea, like, my brain is on fry status right now, between that and the whole Marco asking God, Izo, does Izo believe in God? Wano's been crazy enough with the ghost stuff and all this, and these other themes. And this one, though, if this is really translated the way that it states, it's going to be a crazy question for the series, because I don't think anybody's ever asked that before. And it would imply that they're aware of such things. They're aware of deities, right? Like I was saying earlier, but actual God is something different. And then even like with the Lunarian thing, when you think about Lunarian, you think about the moon. Moon affects tide. We've talked about this before, right? But the other thing with the moon is the mink, right? And then even in this chapter, we get Sulong in the same chapter where we're talked to about Lunarians. And it's like, okay, I see Oda is doing this spider web thing that we got going on here, because these different creatures in the series all serve a purpose besides them being their own people, right? The fishmen, the Skypians now, whatever's going on with King and the mink, and they have their special abilities. How mink have electro, fishmen have fishman karate, and the ability to manipulate liquids on land, in a sense, like what Jinbei did with the tea back in Whole Cake Island. Now you got the sky race of not a Skypian, right? Just a different race in its own that can conjure fire as a natural ability. That's wild. And he just happens to have a devil fruit on top of that, and hockey. So it's just like, this dude, King is going to be an all-around fighter. Zoro even said it like, oh, dude, you ain't no swordsman. You never did say you were a swordsman, Because King's sword with the notches on it, that was dope, how you knocked Zoro's swords away. I don't know how Zoro got him back, but, that's neither here nor there. He's Zoro. And then he punches, right? He punches Wado, basically. Zoro just took that full force, like, okay, that's cool, but King is going to have all the moves, right? He could go from using Hiken, or something like that, to trying to steal Shi Son Son, and then take Zoro to Suplex City, and then Sweet Chin music him or something. He's just going to have all it, because the way he talks about tradition, right? We know in Wano, tradition is a big deal. So for him to question, like, why would you fight? He said something to the effect of, like, when people fight traditionally, he's surprised why people do that. That's almost like one of them conversations, like, who would win a fight between Mike Tyson and Bruce Lee? You know what I mean? Like, one of those fundamental conversations about the difference between traditionalism and actually effective fighting, and that whole scheme. For that to be brought up is interesting, because I remember even with Zoro, I thought the first time, like, when he would fight different people, they would make fun of Santo-Ryu. I thought that was going to be part of his gag. People make fun of it, but nobody ever mentions it. Like, Ryuma is the only character that's really mentioned the fact that he used to, and Hayachi for obvious reasons. But he called it a circus act. You know what I mean? Like, even Mihawk didn't. I'm not going to say he doesn't know what Santo-Ryu is. Maybe it wasn't a thing before Zoro. but he didn't mention anything about it. You know what I mean? He just called Zoro weak and all this other stuff, but he never talked about Santoryu itself. And like even the first time, like Wado never broke. So like that's the sword to me in the sense where that sword is almost stronger than any sword that he may ever have because of the connection and like how souls work and stuff in the series. Where in the beginning of the series, Water should have been broken by Mihawk, but it wasn't. So it's just like, okay, well it's never gonna break then. But it's just like little stuff like that I think about in regards to Zoro. So when Zoro's like, yeah, you're not a swordsman, you know what? And I rock with that. I rock with that. I hope King is just very advantageous. He does whatever is the most necessary at that point to get him to dub. And I like what Zoro says though, because I'm pretty sure he's used this statement before, but my brain's is everywhere. And basically told King, I'll bite through your throat if that's what I gotta do to get this dub. Now, if a man who carries a sword in his mouth, pause, and can fight with it efficiently tells you that, he can probably do it, right? Like, in a sense, he's a tiger at times, right? We've seen that move a few times throughout the series, and it almost makes me think that's going to happen, especially when I don't think Oda's going to go that crazy with it, but then when you think about who's who adding Haki to his teeth, and, Zoro already uses Haki, maybe Haki's up his teeth, and he really does take a bite. Like the Burger King commercials, have breakfast with the king. That's exactly what Zoro might do. I just hope he doesn't end up with King's Devil Fruit, because he chewed on him or something like that. But that's really where my mind was going with that. And I don't know, man, this chapter just had a bunch of crazy stuff in it. Like that first part with Marco and Whitebeard, that took a lot of my thought process. Because thinking about why they would be having that conversation to me it's insane. What would have to be going on for them to be talking about, King's Race and Mary Joie, and it just makes me think they were talking about the Celestial Dragons and even how Marco got his fruit. Like, like, you know what I mean? Just, I don't know, man. That one fried my brain. Like I said, and the way that Oda was connecting that conversation with Sanji and genetic augmentation is just, this is about to get really serious. And then now, of course, the Zoro stuff, because that's been foreshadowed off and on the entire series with this Shimosuke stuff. Because y'all know I say all the time, man. What do I like to say? Hailing in from the south side of Shimosuke Village. I mean, I've been saying that forever, man. The Senpai of the Santoryu, man. Rora no Zoro, man. We knew it was coming. I hope his fighting style is of its own, right? Because the reason Santoryu even exists is basically because Kuina died. Initially, he went from one sword, couldn't beat Kuina, went to two swords, and Kuina was calling him Two Sword Zoro, similar to the beginning of Wano with Nitoryu Oden, right? His lore was stolen, right? Stolen by Orochi. That's why one of the theories that I came up with a while ago, when I first started talking to y'all, was what sword style was Zoro going to use in Wano? Because he's already going to be a legend in Wano because of the things that stuff already have happened up until this point. Would he use the two sword style, like for Oden in a sense? This is when he first, like when he first got Enma, I was already thinking, like, I wonder if that's what they're going with that, but because Zoro's respect for Wano as a whole to give back Shusui, like, yeah, he traded for it, but let's be real, he probably would have gave it up anyway, because he knew who Ryuma was. We have to assume he knew, because of the way he called him a samurai from Wano, and Wano was not a thing in the story in Thriller Bark. I think he got referenced with Ace once. I'm not sure if that reference had occurred at that time period yet, but it wasn't a thing like that, So for him to even know that, similar to how in the beginning of the story he knew who Mihawk was before we even did. So Zoro has these situations where he's not always giving information about his backstory because he just doesn't talk about that stuff. Like the Tsunachi thing. We didn't get that for how long? Like we didn't even you know, it's just wild. And like in of course the design, right? I didn't find the whole one-eyed samurai thing to be all that like it was okay, you know. But when did maybe that was just a me thing? I just assumed Ryuma always had one eye. I just didn't really think about it in terms of Zoro, but their designs have always been the same. It's like the first thing you notice, and then when you see the one shot, you're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, okay." We knew this is before we knew what Wano was. We knew this was going to be a thing. So I don't know if I like as long as Santoryu is his only, and that wasn't something that fate passed down. Because Shusui getting back to Wano, you have to. It really, if you think about it, it's not all that crazy. It really is happenstance, and in real life, I could see an event like that occurring in that kind of way, where something that's stolen just happens to end back in the same land where it came from. That's not too far fetched to me. What is far fetched though is if Shimosuke Ushimaru was a practitioner of the Santoryu. I wouldn't like that one bit. I don't like if that's what they're going with that. I don't like it. Zoro being from Wano initially, that makes sense, right? Of course, yeah, we never really know Zoro's parents, right? And we don't. All we know about him is through Koyoshiro. That's it. And we have so many speculations about him, right? I even brought up in my sword why Kainu could be in sword chapter had something to do with Koyoshiro, right? And where they live and their ties to Wano. So it's just like even Zoro having the blaze attack that he only used on Ryuma and now Kaido, right? And Roof Piece, where these little things about Zoro we just not given. And when we do get information, it's like it doesn't always explain anything. Like the Conqueror's Hockey thing that's been going on in the community, where you're like, wait, what? Why would Zoro not know that already? He's experienced Conquerors a long time ago, so why would he not know what that feeling is? You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So, like I said, this Zoro King fight is gonna take like the exposition that we're gonna get on both characters is like we knew what we was gonna get with Zoro. But I didn't think that the exposition on King was going to have an impact on the series like what I think it's about to do. And I'm all for it, man, because as much as it appears that the series is starting to tie up loose ends about things, especially being more open about talking about Vegapunk. We've been waiting for so long. I'm just happy that it is here and that we're getting these things. Even if I don't always know what's going on. Because this Shimosuke Ushimaru thing, the Shimosuke have to play a role at some point. Similar to the Korizumi and the Kozuki. So, what else happened in this chapter? We're seeing Neko and Inu. The moon is back out. And just like I was talking about earlier with the moon, right? The Lunarians. And now we have the moon and Sulong popping up in this chapter. Jack is a jobber, man. You know, he's been getting jobbed the whole series since he's been introduced. So it's just another day in the life for Jack the Drought. You know, maybe he's called Jack the Drought because he just doesn't win. Like he does a bunch of stuff, but it just never results in anything necessarily. Like he never accomplished anything. Raizo's still alive. Like he couldn't clap the scabbards in the Roof Piece. Like you know, it is what it is. Perorino, like I told y'all, I never had him standing a chance against Neko in the first place. Like I just don't. I don't know. I just don't. Like if he gets help randomly, I could see it, but Neko's even with what Neko already suffered. For him to be able to go toe to toe with Jack under whatever stipulations you want to give it, it doesn't matter. I don't think just based on fighting style that Peril Sparrow would have stood a chance against Jack, combatively speaking. Like he could probably do some sneaky stuff with the candy, but I don't know. Jack seemed almost unkillable at this point. But we gonna see, man. I just wanted to holler at y'all about all this crazy stuff. Especially the stuff with Marco and Whitebeard, right? The Zoro and Sanji, Zoro, like they're six. Like, dude, King is just. I'm rambling now. I enjoyed talking to y'all. I enjoyed these chapters or this chapter. This chapter felt like it was like 3 or 4 chapters put together, and my brain is just on fry mode right now. Right, like you can literally see the steam coming from my forehead at this point. But I think that's all I really got to talk about. I think it was. Oh, there was a panel when Zoro got his sword. Before his swords got out of the way, there's a panel that says, like, that blade. I don't know if that's King talking about Enma, or is that Zoro talking about King's blade? Like, the ability for it to catch swords and stuff like that. Because I don't. It wouldn't make any sense for Higoro and Kapamatsu to say that about Enma because they know he had Enma already. So I didn't understand that panel. I guess we'll see. But other than that, man, we out here, man. Void Century time, Zoro time, King time, God's Valley time, Whitebeard time, you name it, man. Y'all be safe out there. I'll see you soon. Maybe 3 or 4 more videos. It's gonna be a long week for me, but I'm just having a great time, man. With the world building, like the fighting and the action is cool, but that's what I be here for. This world building events that unlock key points in the story, and I just think that's what we're getting with King. And I like I said, I'm just surprised that it was going that heavy with this dude, man. He's just not your average boss, but neither was Go Curry. Thank y'all. Be easy. One Peace.